The soil is the place from which all plant matter gets its nutrients. And if you keep sucking the nutrients out, the soil is useless. For all of history, the way the soil was replenished and the nutrients were returned in some measure to the soil was that plant matter was allowed to decay, to compost, to restock the soil. You may have one crop of celery which will suck certain chemicals out of the soil. Another crop, wheat or something else, may return those same chemicals to the soil. So the soil maintains a balance. It's kind of sad because we as a species have become so disconnected from the earth. We don't have any real contact with the earth. We don't have any sense of its functions, its feel, its nature, its seasons, its timing. First of all, the topsoil on which food is grown now is nothing more than a sponge onto which we pour chemicals that we get from oil and natural gas. And without those chemicals, the soil has been turned into a junkie. The soil is worthless. So when you plant a crop now, what happens is you drive an oil-powered machine, drives along, and it plows. Then you drive another oil-powered machine, and it drives along, and it plants. And then you irrigate. Well, how do you irrigate? Well, that water is pumped by pumps that are powered by electricity. So next thing you do is come along and you fertilize it. All commercial fertilizers are made from ammonia, and the feedstock for ammonia is natural gas. So you have ammonium nitrate fertilizers that are then sprayed on by another oil-powered vehicle. Then the crop dusters come along that are powered by oil that spray pesticides that are all made from petroleum. Then when it's time to harvest the food, what do? You drive another oil-powered machine and you harvest it. You use another oil-powered machine to drive it to a place where it's processed. Then you wrap it up in plastic, which is oil, and you put it in another oil-powered machine and you drive it X number of miles to a food distribution warehouse, an oil-powered machine to your supermarket. The way food is grown, produced, and moved around the world today, it's an enormous waste of hydrocarbon energy, which doesn't make sense. Why do we have strawberries from Chile? Why do we have spinach from China? Why do we ship anchovies halfway around the world to be packaged in tin cans and,
Looks like a typical Canadian family dinner. But do you know how much of it is actually Canadian? We may think of ourselves as being totally self-sufficient. Well, think again. We import more than 53% of our vegetables and almost all of our fruit. In 40 years, red meat imports have gone up 600%. In fact, in a 15-year period, our food imports rose 160%, while our population rose only 15%. In 2004, Alberta imported over $170 million worth of fresh vegetables. Their exports, 400,000. Even Ontario, with some of Canada's best farmland, imports $4 billion worth of produce more than it exports. And we don't just bring in exotic fruit or things we can't grow here. We're talking about cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers. For every apple we export, we import about 5. For pears, it's 1 out and 700 in. In 2007, Nova Scotia produced half as many blueberries as it did just 4 years earlier. If this continues, we may lose the ability to produce many of the foods we eat. This impacts far more than your dinner. It impacts our economy, our environment, and our neighborhoods. How? Well, for starters, many of our small family farms struggle to stay afloat, while many of our grocery dollars end up in other countries. So are cheap imports really worth it? While much of our farmland is protected on paper, it's disappearing at an alarming rate. In the second half of the 20th century, Central Ontario paved over 49% of its prime farmland to accommodate the expansion of the Greater Toronto Area. The Kitchener-Waterloo area is surrounded by fertile farmland, yet the average distance traveled by 58 imported foods commonly eaten in Waterloo is 4,497 kilometers. Where does our food come from? This so-called fresh food can take days or even weeks to get to us and can lose nutritional value on the way. Local food can be on our plates in hours. Fruits and vegetables are picked for their flavor, not their ability to withstand the rigors of international travel. Shouldn't we be producing more of our fresh food here at home and importing only when necessary?
For the consumer to understand how much energy goes into their food, I think all they have to understand is, if it's local, it's less, and if it is unprocessed. A lot of the energy in our food comes from processing. All the complicated steps needed to make a Twinkie, all use vast amounts of energy. There are a great many other benefits to eating locally besides conserving energy. There is, I think, the very important benefit of keeping farmers in business. Farmers add a lot to a community. They have great wisdom about the natural world. And then there is the view. There's a wonderful bumper sticker in Europe called Eat Your View. And the premise is that if you don't support these agricultural landscapes around you, they will be sprawled. They will be covered with houses and highways and shopping malls. And the way to keep them open is to eat from the farms that constitute that view. And that's true. I mean, that's how you preserve those agricultural landscapes, is eating from those farms.